See, there we go. So, hello everyone. Today I have the incredible honor of talking to none other than Nathan. Known for his groundbreaking work in game development, Nathan's journey and insights have captivated fans and inspiring developers alike. I am beyond excited to dive into your creative process, learn more about your inspirations, and hear your advice for those of us dreaming to make our mark in the field. So, let's jump right into it. Thank you very much for accepting this, Nathan.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to have you all watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble about game dev. It's my favorite pastime, I think, just talking about making games. But yeah, so really excited to get into it.
So, what originally sparked your passion for game development and what inspired you to make it your career?
It's funny. Growing up, I always wanted to make movies. I watched a lot of Star Wars, and on those DVD sets, they had a whole bunch of behind the scenes, and I'd see George Lucas making all the films. And growing up as childhood, I was like, I want to make movies. I'm gonna make Star Wars episodes 7, 8, and 9. That's what I'm gonna do. And that was my goal for a very long time during my earlier years. And then I think it was around the age of 14, in the early 2010s, is when Minecraft came out. And I started doing private servers with my friends. And I remember, I think it was one of the first few years of Minecraft, they brought out the documentary with Notch. And I remember watching it on YouTube. It was a preview version. You can still watch it online. And there was this portion where Notch was just debugging Minecraft and showing them how you can, make an exploding arrow and just, he would have the game up and then go to, Eclipse, which was the editor he was using, and he just changed things. And to me, I was like, that's amazing. You can do that. I knew how to make movies. I was making, stuff with my video camera all through my childhood. But once I realized that you could, I loved video games, and I always played my Xbox and PC and loved Nintendo stuff. But I never understood how to make games. It was a black box to me. But when I saw this documentary and saw that, oh, you just need a computer and a keyboard and basically just be a really smart person, you can make games. To me, that started my journey of learning how to program. A lot of it at the start was just doing Minecraft servers, so doing plugins, used a Bucket server a lot, and obviously at that time, my friends and I after school would get home, would up on the server, and I'd be modding new stuff into the game, and we'd start economies and all this sort of stuff, and it was always it was funny. We had an old Mac computer, and that's what ran my friends and I server. It was just this Bucket server that ran on this iMac. And whenever it closed down or there's a power outage, my friends would message me and be like, "Yo, Nathan, the server's down. Turn it put it back on." And so that's kind of my early stages on being exposed to programming. Obviously at school, did some courses in HTML and very basic stuff. Even used there was we did a class that was learning Visual Basic, the programming language, which they don't use anymore for good reason. But even just I don't know, I wanted to be what Notch was. I saw that was okay, one man can make a game, and basically from there is where I learnt. I downloaded Unity. Back in the day, they had the Unreal SDK, which I played around with a bit. And then just anything I could get my hands on. I learnt Blender. And that was kind of the start of it was usually around, I think it was Unity 3, so things were still kind of getting the start of solo game dev, indie game dev. Games Super Meat Boy and Braid and games like that had come out, and so the 360 and stuff, indie arcade and everything was kind of beginning to boom. And I was just this young kid with so much potential, the light in my eyes. I was like, oh, everyone's making games now. You don't need to work at this big company, and it was really exciting time. And so from there, basically, I just got more and more involved and learnt more and more. And then through the years, yeah, it's just been that gradual progression of, learning different stuff. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got started. And basically from there on, it's just keep
Mhm.
working, keep learning, and keep making things.
Yeah, that's great. I empathize with this a lot because I feel like Minecraft has also been a huge starting point for me as well. I always ask myself, how are they making this stuff, but never really got into it. I think,
Mm.
yeah, I have a bit of a regret when it comes to that because I could have started it even earlier, but still, it's never too late. So here I am.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Or even now, I've gone on Discords and there's kids who are 8 years old, and they're programming games in Unity better than I can now. Like they understand the
Oh.
fundamentals of like C sharp and stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind these 8-year-olds. But because they're younger and they've got more time and more, energy and stuff, they can just understand it. Where for me, it's like, oh, back in the day, all I had was brackies, but it was like 3 videos, where now
Mm.
it's like, yeah. So I also agree with that. Like it's never ever too late to start making games. Even if you're like 40, 50, retired or whatever, like we shouldn't gatekeep the age, I think, because then uh, it's like gatekeeping painting or like writing or whatever else. It's like they're all skills that you can learn over time. And obviously, I feel like game dev can feel like a young man's game because of some of the cultural things in terms of like how much you work and the things you put in and the trends and stuff. Um, but yeah, I totally agree. I don't think anyone should ever feel like they're too old to start making games.
Hmm. So when you have a concept for a game, how do you go about shaping it from an idea into an actual playable experience? Do you have a specific starting point?
Um, for me, it depends on the idea. I had for many years like I call it my game journal of all the ideas I wrote down. And I don't think I've actually made any. A lot of it, like I've taken concepts from things, and that was during a time in my life where I couldn't make games as much, whether I was studying or doing other things. Where it's like, okay, this is a big project. I write down all my ideas and work on it. But for example, with my most recent game I'm working on right now, Coco, it started with obviously like the idea phase of okay, I want to make something. Um, After playing Animal Crossing, I was like, I love the roost and that little cafe area, but I wish it had more to it than just sitting and drinking, which was like a mini game. And I was like, okay, I think I can make that. And so it was basically first opening Unity and prototyping, getting a character controller in. And I think that's for me now the best way that I can start momentum is starting with a very basic prototype. Because from there, sometimes, if I do a giant design document, there might be a concept or a mechanic that doesn't work well. I think it's better to start with a very basic project and with your own skill set, try to make something from that. And sometimes that's, the original idea that you had. But there's also ways that you need to like pivot and change things or even like scope up or down. If you have an idea for a game and you make it in 2 days, well, then, hey, you can maybe scale that up a bit into something that's a bit bigger. So for me, it's mostly trying to get my hands dirty as quickly as I can because then usually reality hits me in the face saying, Nathan, you're scoping up too big. Okay, you've been doing this for 6 weeks now, and you haven't got a playable prototype. Um, I don't know. For me, it helps to be more realistic with what the project's going to end up being. Where for me, if I'm in a design document or if I'm just brainstorming a lot, things can scale up very quickly, and sometimes I lose sight of the original idea. So yeah, that's kind of what I like to do usually is just start the project. Sometimes it's even just putting in a few prepaid like assets that I have and seeing if they work well together and then kind of going from there.
Mhm. Yeah, great. I think it's great to keep it this way. What do you think is key to keeping players fully engaged?
I think that's a really good question. For me, I would go there's two areas of it, I think. I think one is respecting players' time. I think we've seen a lot of games more recently that really kind of just all the mechanics they include, especially with mobile games. Like recently, I started playing the new Pokemon TGC Pocket, and that has taken up so much of my time just because of how addictive it is. Like all the mechanics keep me engaged, but it sucks because when I'm so engaged for so long, I eventually burnt out. I actually think for me, good engagement is actually having like an ebb and flow. Very much like other things in life. I feel like, for example, with when I do live streams on my own channel, I like to have high energy for like maybe the first half hour to an hour, and then have a low energy. And having that kind of wavelength of high engagement, low engagement for players as well, I think helps them not get too fatigued. Things like cutscenes and stuff are actually quite helpful to give players a rest and also a reward for what they've done. Um, Obviously, there's heaps of mechanics of changing things up. I think good examples are like Cult of the Lamb, where you're doing half of it is dungeon crawling, and the half is just cultivating a farm area basically or a cult. Um, and kind of switching between those two things. But I also think the most important thing really is respecting players' time. Because for a lot of people, for example, I've got friends who play a lot of MOBAs. As soon as they feel like they've been disrespected, they will stop playing that game completely. And so I think in the long term, if you want to have really good playtime with your players, it's to have that high and low energy or engagement, which keeps them coming back. And I think for solo devs as well, and people who are making smaller games, always trying to give more bite-sized content and making people want to come back for more and having kind of that demand will drive more players to play your games rather than if you just made a much wider range of kind of slodge or low effort content that people might be more disinterested in. Like one thing I would love to experiment with in the future is kind of making a lot shorter, high production quality games if I ever had the ability to do so. Basically, like an Uncharted, but it's like a 40 to 2 hour playtime. And I feel like there's actually a quite large audience for that because people want high quality content with really good engagement, exciting, things. But like for example, when I played The Last of Us Part Two, by the quarter part of that game, I was so like tired and done for. I couldn't get through with it. So, yeah, I think just gauging players' levels of interest and the energy they have, and trying to make your mechanics around that. Whether it's okay, the player's bored, we need higher engagement for this area, or they've been desensitized to things, so let's reel things back and start slow again.
Mm. I totally agree. We also got a question from Blaster, and he asks, "Do you like 2D games?"
I do like 2D games. Making them, I don't do as much, mostly because my 2D art skills have just gone out the window. But I do play them. I love my Switch, and so I'll usually be on like the eShop, and I'll just pick up some games that are 2D. And 2D, especially when it's done by like really good artists, can be quite beautiful games. And I think, yeah, so I love all types of games. People say what my favorite game is. It's like I can't pick. There's too many. So yeah, 2D definitely. I love them.
Do you focus more on current trends or prioritize your personal creative vision? How do you find the right balance?
I think, I mean, for me personally, right now, it is definitely more creative vision and then trying to wrap around kind of trends and marketing around that. Because for me, at least, with my current game I'm working on, I want that to be something original and I can look back at and be proud of. I think it also depends on what you want to accomplish as a game developer. If you want to be someone who's in the business of it, who wants to build a brand and a studio and a business, then you need to be more focused on the trends and on the things that people actually want to play, because that's just the smart thing to do. If you want to make money making games, then you need to follow what the market's doing. But if you're someone who wants to be more artistic, who maybe is less concerned about the money, maybe you've got other things, other ways of making income, and games are a way for you to express yourself, then yeah, focus on your vision because there's still room for that. I went to a few weeks ago. We had Melbourne Internationals Games Week, which was a bunch of game events throughout the week. And obviously, there was the business side of it. We had bigger companies releasing games and doing talks and stuff. But there was this one event called Parallels, where basically it's more focused on the cultural impact of games. They'll have like games from students and independent creators who are just making things that kind of have a message more than a business practice. And people will love it because it's expressive, it's different, it's unique. And the talks and stuff that they're too, just expressing, it wasn't about the business. It was about here's my vision for this game. Here's the thing I want to experiment with. Because that's the thing in society. We need obviously an economy, and part of that is the business side and making things people can consume. But there's also the artistic side and things that people can, be more philosophical about. And yeah, so I think there's a mesh of two, and depending on what you want to do, you have to decide for yourself. That's one thing I learned, especially the past week or so, talking to people, is that like you take the advice that you're given, but then you also need to kind of use your own judgment on things because the people giving you advice did the same thing for what they did. They got advice from someone else, and then they did their own thing. And so when you're looking at what you want to make, you need to first ask yourself, what are my goals making this game? And then from there, you can kind of direct yourself more towards the artistic sense or the business side of it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very wise. Another question that we got is that have you ever released a game on Nintendo Switch?
Not yet, but I plan to. The game I'm working on right now, I kind of initially had the idea of porting it to the Switch. I'm obviously Switch's kind of developer platform is a bit different. Like I want to personally port it myself, and so that's a lot more work. A publisher would technically be easier because they kind of have systems set up for it. Um, so it is something when I'm developing my game now, I keep in mind whether it's through mechanics and controller input, but also even like the back end stuff. A lot of consoles and stuff will have restrictions on how you can actually program your game. I know with Unity and player prefabs, how they, people will save data. You can't actually use that on consoles. That's not a safe method of saving data. And even things like having a start screen, you need to have on consoles so they can register what controller you're using and stuff like that. So I'm not there yet. I'm still in the kind of early production period of my game, but I'm always thinking about, okay, in the future, if I'm given the opportunity, am I ready for it? And always planning ahead, which sometimes is very hard to do because you don't know everything. But as long as you network right and you've got a few connections, you can always ask them. Because of NDAs and stuff too, they can't tell you the reasons why to certain things. But I've had people be like, "Don't do that because you'll know later." And so you listen to them through their like secondhand advice.
Hmm. Yeah, that is true. Could you tell us about a particularly tough moment in your career and how did you overcome it? Was there a moment that truly tested your commitment?
Um, yes. There obviously there's been many times where I've kind of questioned whether or not I'm valuable enough or skilled enough to make games. And especially when you're around certain people, whether it's friends or families or colleagues who just don't get it. It's crazy when I went to the the game conventions. Reason why I love going there is because of how included I felt. Everyone knew what making games was and what it took to make them and were all passionate about it. But as soon as you go to other groups of people and kind of explain what you want to do, they'll look with you, with the thousand-yard stare, being like, You want to do what?" And from some people, that can be really hurtful because you're like, "Oh, I look for you for my support and advice and wisdom, and you're saying this thing I love, I shouldn't do." Obviously, growing up, I was always told, "Oh, have a plan B," which I kind of do. But it's always been something that I've been very resilient in and making sure that what I want to do is make games. And no matter what anyone says, I'm going to be making games for the rest of my life. There's always been times in my life where things have, because games are such a large commitment. There's been times where things have been at a balance, whether it's been with my work or with my friends or, doing, exercise and that sort of stuff. And so there's definitely been quite a few times where I've been burnt out. Um, I know before I switched my current game project from Unity to Unreal, there was a period where I was like, do I just drop this and give up? Um, and it was really just you'll have moments where things, especially when I'm working on games, where I'll get very emotionally invested and things won't work, whether it's a problem with the engine or my skill, it just isn't to the level that I'm picturing in my head that I want, a certain model to look or a mechanic isn't working right. And I'll have like an emotional impulse of like, this is too hard, I'm giving up, I'm not, you have those doubts, those thoughts. But I usually like to take a break, or watch YouTube videos of other people who are also struggling or working on things. Um, and it's just letting that moment pass and kind of reconfiguring yourself, being like, okay, this is what I love to do. And for me, it's like the thought of not making games. I would not be happy if I could not make games. Like, I don't care if it's on like a 10-year-old laptop using Pico 8 making games, or whether it's using massive rigs and making stuff in Unreal. Like, no matter what it is, I want to be making games. And so that's one thing that's kind of kept me going through it all, is that no matter what, I want to be making video games. For some reason, it's the one thing that I just love doing consistently. You doing YouTube videos, I'll get burnt out. Having video ideas for stuff, I'll get burnt out. I will get burnt out on projects on games, but usually the way that I alleviate that is by starting a new side project and then dropping that later. Um, but that's just how a lot of developers work. So yeah, and I know there's gonna be more times in the future because that's what happens in life is that we just go through trials and things happen where you kind of just go, man, is this really worth it? Because it's not like a regular job or regular, hobby or whatever. It's something that's quite demanding of your time and energy and skill. And for, for example, musicians, they can spend a day or a week or whatever writing an album or a song. For developers, so many of us get caught up making games for years and years. There's people who've made games for decades. And so it's a whole other beast of making things. And so obviously some people aren't made for it. I know people who've gone to like universities and schools for making games, and after a semester they're like, I'm out. This isn't for me. But I think and this is one thing I had a lecturer say to me. They asked, why do you want to make games? Everyone's saying, oh, to make money or to make this idea or whatever. And I just said, I want to make games because I love making games. And he said to me, Nathan, you're going to make it in the industry because that is the one thing that will keep you going. If you just have love for the work, just passion for making games, whether it is whatever in the umbrella of making games, because that's very broad as well, you'll make it in the industry, which for me, it was like, okay, very reassuring. And it's just trying to keep that drive, but also being realistic because at the end of the day, we're not saving lives realistically, and it's something that people can live without. We've lived without video games for a very long time, and so sometimes I remind myself, maybe go spend time with your family, maybe go talk to that friend, maybe do something else because it's not all about games. But at the same time, it's staying committed. The one thing I've always thought about is there's no such thing as a balanced life or balanced work, but there is imbalance. And so a lot of the time when something goes wrong, it means there's a very strong imbalance to something. And so for me, it's always just being aware of, okay, is there something that is quite imbalanced in here and trying to, reconfigure that so that things kind of are more smooth sailing, so to say.
Mm. Thank you very much for opening up, and I think everyone values your personal experience because it's very good to have role models, in this field, especially, and to see that they are all struggling with something as well. It's not like you're alone in this because I feel like a lot of people, even in the comment section, they're like, I failed today and I'm just gonna, abandon everything and move on to something else because it's very hard and demanding, as you said. So I feel like it's very important to see all the sides or all the problems and everything. So yeah. And you also mentioned switching from Unity to Unreal.
Yes.
What made you do the switch?
So it happened around the runtime fee controversy that happened
Mm,
last year. Um, I think that was the push for me to at least try Unreal. I also tried Godot. And basically what I did was when the runtime fee thing happened, I was like, okay, long term, I don't want to use this engine as a solo developer because if this is what's happening now, what's going to happen in a few years' time? And I also felt that I've been using Unity for so long, I felt kind of trapped in, well, what if I work at a different company and they use a different engine? And I don't feel capable enough at learning a new tool. So for me, it was like trying to challenge myself. And so what I did was I went and made a Godot and Unreal project for my Coco game and said, okay, the first thing I made in Unity were these things. Let's try doing that in both engines and see which one I can work in faster. And Unreal ended up being the thing that I just iterated super quickly on. I think it was the blueprints because at the time I was working full time. I was coming home late. By the time you cook, clean, do all the other stuff you need to do and sit down, my brain is fried. Okay, it does not look at a single line of C sharp, but nodes that I can connect dots to. That's something. Oh, okay, I'm pretty good at that. That's pretty easy to do, and you can just drag it out, and then it tells you everything that you can connect it with. That makes my life a lot easier 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm running off of just caffeinated sodas. And so I did that, and I also wanted to make myself more available for the industry. So at the time I was working kind of industry adjacent. I was working full time for a YouTuber, and we've been doing that. And I really wanted to work in games. That's something I'm still kind of working towards, um, full time properly. And I really want, and I'm still interested in very much in doing tech art. And one of the things with tech artists is using Unreal, whether it's doing VFX, rigging, and I went to a few. It's funny because around the same time that the runtime fee thing happened was when we had our Games Week in Melbourne, and so Unreal had a whole day basically showing you all how to dive into Unreal. Which I'm like, okay, I went to that and learned all those things, and then I talked to a bunch of people who weren't hiring at the time, but I was kind of asking for career advice, and they're like, certain companies were like, yeah, Unity is good. We're gonna stick with Unity. Like, it doesn't really matter. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm all covered in that end. But some of the other companies, and especially for me, like as a solo dev, I really wanted to make some first person shooters and kind of get into eventually, in the next 10 years, be able to make things in the similar caliber to Half-Life and Dishonored in that same genre of, first person linear experiences. And I knew that Unreal was really good at like the first person aspect. That's something that, an Ultimate had been made on. And I also really like the fact that obviously Epic Games uses it for Fortnite. And so every feature they add to Unreal has been previewed first in Fortnite, which obviously I don't play Fortnite. That's not really a game for me. Obviously, I don't hate it because it's something that helps, Epic and the tools that I use. And for me, that was really helpful as well. So, for example, like the water system first was built for Fortnite, and then they brought it to Unreal broadly, and they just do the same thing for everything else. And so I felt like had more hope for the future, and I'm still reluctant because there are things where um, like Unreal still takes a cut when you make a certain amount of money. And if I become a rich millionaire, I feel like I'm going to be very reluctant to give them a dime because it's like, no, I made that. Yes, it was your tool, but obviously, when you work for stuff like that, I personally like to have more control of my things. So even now, I'm obviously using Unreal to make my game and probably will make for future games. But I'm also still experimenting with using Godot, even now, because I'm going back to school to do a computer science degree. I'm beginning to work on my own game engine in the very limited time I have. Learning C++ and figuring out how I can do this myself with the frameworks and stuff they have available online. Um, but yeah, I think that answers your question,
That's
hopefully.
cool. Yeah, yeah, congrats. Also, could you share more about the game that you're currently working on? If not, it's totally fine
Yeah,
to
yeah, of
not.
course.
Yeah.
So right now it's called Coco. It's a cozy cafe game. The way I've pitched it, people don't really know many Flash games, unfortunately, but there were Flash games I played growing up called like Penguin Diner and Diner Dash, and they're basically you play like a waitress and you wait tables. People in the modern day kind of understand more the themes of Overcooked, and so it's like that, but instead of making the orders, you're the one serving it. And so the original concept, like I said, came from Animal Crossing, where you'll be like in this little roost cafe, and kind of adding a bit more intensity to it. And so I'm making this independently myself in Unreal. I've got yeah, but the scope of the game is kind of it's like this right now because I'm like, okay, depending on what happens in the next year, the plan is basically to make a vertical slice where you can wait tables, upgrade your store, not dynamically, like you can't place tables or furniture and stuff. It's more, here's the space, and then you can upgrade where items are selected to be different styles. And then having a bit of a story. Like I have this, I don't know how the story is going to change or adapt, but for me, I'm trying to make something that can be like somewhat impactful because I started this kind of out of a lot of like the COVID lockdown restrictions, like here in Australia and in Melbourne, we had super severe restrictions that we couldn't go out or do anything for a very long period of time. And we've actually seen a massive effect on people's ability, like kids that just haven't had um, experiences in their youth. They haven't gone to, parties or they haven't, and it's not to say that, they haven't had a good, it's hard because when I say go to parties, I don't mean so much, oh, they didn't party. It's like they didn't have the social interactions they needed to understand and to help them in life. In many ways that people would, graduate and kind of go on a gap year and stuff. There were people who didn't have those experiences. And so the story of my game as well is I'm trying to find a way in which I can kind of see some of the things that people might need in the world today. And for me, I think one of those things is actually community and focusing on being able to outreach to others. And so, in the terms of the story of my game right now, in the very rough cut that I have, the barista that you're playing as basically has lost everything. You know, they've dropped out of school, they've lost their job, you know, the relationships have ended, and they've got this barista waitress job. And your boss is basically trying to help you kind of come into your own. And you have experiences where you have different NPCs, whether you know it's a single mother who's struggling with her kids, or you know this young guy who doesn't know how to ask this girl out, and kind of having these small experiences through kind of packaged with this other gameplay that will help people kind of. Moral of the story is that you should reach out to people more, and by you going out and serving others, you're going to be better for it. And so that's kind of there's other things in the game that you know I want people to have their heartstrings pulled, but it's a lot. It's to say a lot, but I don't have anything to prove of that yet. So I don't want to promise you that you're going to cry at the end of the game because I don't know yet. I haven't written the game. I'm not sure. But the vision I have is something that hopefully, although the game will be quite short, is impactful for people who do play it, and it's accessible enough that you know people who may not be like for me. I'm making it for my wife. I want her to be able to play it and experience it, and you know feel something um, after finishing it. And that's something I want a lot of people to be able to like. For me, it's kind of like my if this is the only game I make, I want to be proud of it. And so that's kind of what I'm working towards. Right now, it's very much getting mechanics and visually the art. Like I'm doing another art pass of the UI and trying to get my pipeline down so I can do things a bit quicker. Because it is very much like 3D Animal Crossing style. And the thing is, that takes a long time to do. And so I'm trying to make that a bit faster and maybe cut a few corners where I can to get kind of that out of the way. And then once I'm very much happy in my process, it's going to be working on getting the levels done, making sure the gameplay loop is good, and obviously incorporating the story as well, which hopefully, you know, despite never writing a full-length story myself, with enough player feedback, hopefully, I'm doing private play tests right now, people can enjoy. So
Mm.
that's kind of what I'm working on right now, and obviously side projects in the future. Like recently, I did a Slender Man thing on my YouTube channel. I don't know why I did it, honestly. When people were like, "This came out of nowhere. Why'd you do it?" I'm like, I don't know. I just finished the Games Week convention and was like, Halloween's in 2 weeks. I should do a thing for that. And so I made the Slender Man game. And so I like to also between working on Coco Loco, I try to restrict myself from doing side projects too much because that has been an issue in the past. And luckily, my wife keeps me accountable when I work on different things. She's like, "That's not Coco Loco. You need to be more, you know, work on the thing you're meant to." And so the one way I get out of doing that is by doing game jams. I've done some collabs with Dan Poz as well with some Cinti game jams. And then obviously in January, we've got the Global Game Jam, which I'm going to go do. So working on the main project in most of the months, and then occasionally when there's an opportunity for doing smaller games, I like to do that because it's fun. It's fun. It also helps me because in that small span of time where I actually finish something, I'm more productive the week after working on Coco Loco because I'm like, all right, I'm in the rhythm. I can do this. So I will end up, you know, finishing 2 or 3 goals I had for the project in a week because, you know, the week before I just made an entire game, you know. Making a game jam or doing a game jam, I feel like, especially if you finish the game and it's decent, you feel quite proud of yourself. And then therefore going into whatever you work on next, you're usually feeling quite powerful and confident. And so I like to do that as well because, you know, other times though, like I've done a few Cinti ones and I'm just like, man, that was not good. I am burnt out and usually take a bit of time off. But yeah, it's mostly just focusing on Coco Loco and making it as good as I can, and obviously doubting myself every step of the term and just figuring out, you know, what the scale is, who actually wants to play this game, and figuring all that stuff out. So yeah, that's I've been doing that for 3 years now. But 2 of those years were in Unity, and I've done more in the 1 year in Unreal than I have with the 2 years in Unity, which I'm always say, and people go, "Oh, wow, that's really impressive." And I'm like, "Yeah, because Unreal has half the tools I was building in Unity." So,
Mm,
yeah, um,
didn't expect
yeah,
that.
that's yeah, yeah.
Okay, maybe I will start thinking about Unreal as well more.
It
Um,
honestly depends on like what you need and what you're working with. I've got a friend who he does PS1 horror games. Unity is perfect for that. You know, he can quickly program very basic things. He's already got all the shader stuff set. But for me, for example, my biggest issue in Unity was making a NPC state machine and having like NPCs go from like spawn to queue to table to drink to order to like there was so many steps and I had to program every single one of them. And because I was doing that late at night, there was just so many issues where Unreal, you just have like an AI system and a behavior tree, and that was all done for me. And the same thing is like in Godot, there's stuff that's just like i- perfectly for it. So it just depends so much on that's why I say to everyone, it's like, what do you want to make? When you figure that out, then pick the tool. Don't do the other way around because then yeah, it won't be what you want it to be.
Thank you very much. We will keep that in mind. Also, your game sounds great, and I love the fact that you are thinking about literally everyone, like your wife, the kids that didn't really, had this social interaction experience. And when you mentioned the waitress and the gameplay itself, it reminded me of a game that I used to play when I was a child. I think it's called Penguin Diner or Dinner, something like that.
That is the exact game that inspired it. Hardly anyone knows it. I always say Diner Dash because everyone's like, "Oh, I know that one," but Penguin Diner, that is the game. So the best way
Okay.
to explain my game is
Is
Animal Crossing New Horizons meshed with
oh,
Penguin Diner one for one. If you merge those together, that is what I want Coco Loco to be. I am so
oh,
glad that you know what that game is
I
because
know.
I've spent
Yeah.
so much time playing that game growing up and I
Same,
love it.
same. I was just coming, I don't even remember, primary school, kindergarten, whatever, coming from school back home and played it for hours and didn't even, my parents were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm playing something," and time flies, literally. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I love the
Yeah.
game. So I'm glad
I'm very glad.
it's similar. I want to see an upgraded version of that. I would love
Yeah,
to play.
exactly. That's why I'm like the 3D version of that. That's what I want.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay, how do you keep your ideas fresh and maintain your motivation over the long hours and big projects? I know you mentioned game jams and small projects, if that's what helps you, but besides that, is there anything else or?
Yeah, for me, for example, one interesting thing I did was, I think, was it earlier this year? It might have been, or maybe it was last year. They had this meetup in Melbourne where I live, um, and it was this guy from overseas who was basically he gave talks on how to pitch your game to publishers. And I also applied to do like a one-on-one session with him for like 15 minutes, and he had some really good inputs into different things that publishers look for. And one of the things that he said that I had never thought of before was Twitch integration. And I was like, huh. And he's like, yeah, what publishers want is they want ways streamers can play their game and viewers can interact with the game and then go back and have rewards. And so I think another way to stay fresh is to be going to different things and looking at different inputs from people. Obviously, business side people will have different ideas compared to those who are, in a Discord channel. Um, and so for me, keeping ideas fresh is just going to more things and talking with more people. The amount of ideas I've had is just from other people saying things. I think that's another thing that as developers, we can be quite reclusive and isolated. And so if you ever get a chance, whether it's through like online meetups or things in person locally, even if it means traveling interstate or out of country, if you can, doing that, I think allows for different perspectives. And that's helped me a lot. Like I haven't thought about the Twitch thing for a while because I've been focusing on other things, but I would never have thought about it or even comprehended it. And I had this whole idea of when streamers play the game, and viewers are watching the streamers play the game, if they connect the accounts correctly, Because basically, what you do with Twitch integration is you sign in on the game through Twitch. And depending, for example, if you're streaming, you'll get like certain rewards, and those who are watching can get drops. And so I thought, okay, maybe if um, viewers help streamers complete certain sections of the game, then the viewers get a specific reward, and streamers can get rewards as well. So it's stuff like that where it's like I never thought about that. And one of the issues I had was like I feel like people who will play my game and stream it online are just going to play this thing for 2 hours and then that be it. But if I put in things like drops and achievements for, you either streaming the game or you watching streamers stream it, that adds another element to things that like is interesting that I wouldn't have thought of. And so going and just talking with other people about different ideas, and especially those who are in the industry who know what they're doing. And there's some very creative people who you'll say a concept for a thing, and they'll take it completely different, but they'll spin something in a way that you're like, oh, I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it in my game. We'll put it on the list of things that I might do in the future because that's a very clever thing. Um, yeah, I've had people saying you need to make the game super hard in certain areas because if you make it more difficult while having a chill vibe, people will like that. I'm more inclined to be like, oh, okay, I don't know about that one. So obviously, some bits of advice I'm like, I don't need to always take on board. But for me, yeah, getting new ideas is, listening to podcasts and streams like this. There's heaps of them on YouTube now. Just listening to what people have to say and kind of considering, even though, for example, like I watching GDC talks will hear like AAA developers talk about this thing, finding ways to not replicate but take examples from other people and incorporate into your own things, I think also helps keep your ideas fresh. Because there's so many games out there. It's really hard sometimes, especially for me. I feel like I always kind of copy other people's ideas and games and concepts because I'm like, it's proven, it works, I like it. But it's always kind of putting in your own personality and spin. And sometimes it's even just being like, you know what? I would love this mechanic if they just did this instead. And if you work well with your game, try and incorporate that into it. And maybe there's more fresh new ideas.
Yeah, that's true. Now, looking back, what has been one of the most rewarding moments of your career so far?
That is a great question. Um, There's been a few. Obviously, whenever I do YouTube videos, like recently I did this Thunderman video, and the reception to that has actually been pretty positive. There's been a few who are like, you should have spent longer on it. And I'm like, you're right. But also, I was trying to this was meant to be a short project, and you're cutting it past 2 weeks. So this thing needs to get out the door. But I'm quite proud of that. And the fact that people have played it and people are like, I kind of want more of this. It's like, oh, okay. That's really cool. I think in terms of more recently, I had some really like incredible experiences at this week event in Melbourne. Um, I got the chance to, for me, like the highlight of my experience in games was during that week. Later in that week, they had PAX and Steam and stuff where they were announcing that the Steam Deck's coming to Australia officially, which I'm waiting for pre-orders to open up so I can grab my OLED straight away because I'm a Valve fanboy. But at the business events, there was actually one of the developers there, and he is my hero. And it was crazy because they during the event they have this app called Meet to Match, and it shows you all the people at the event, and you can reach out to them saying, "Hey, can you meet at this time to have a chat?" Or sometimes publishers do it to pitch a game and stuff like that. But I saw him on there, and it was on like it goes for 3 days, and I think it was on the second day at the end that I saw his name pop up, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I need to say hi to him at least." And I reached out and I was petrified because I'm like, tomorrow's the last day. He's only here for a day. He's probably booked out. But he confirmed it. And I was able to go and talk with him. And I found out because he was the lead on Half Life Alex, which I absolutely adore. And I was able to talk to him, and he was such a chill guy. He's Australian, but obviously moved over there a long time ago. He originally worked on the first Team Fortress mod, and then Valve brought them over, and he's been working there basically ever since on the Half Life, TF2, like every Dota, all the stuff there. And so talking with him was, I think, a career highlight. Because I have always wanted to work at Valve. That's, I think, for me, my if I accomplish this in life, I will die happy, basically. And having the opportunity randomly on a Wednesday afternoon to talk to one of the developers and say, "Hey, I love your work. I really appreciate what you're doing." Um, and having like a 15-minute conversation of like, "I want to work at Valve one day. What do I need to do?" And him laying out everything and having that immediate feedback of, "This is what I'm doing. This is where I want to go," and him being like, you have potential to work at Valve one day. Like, it's not as far out of reach as you think. Like, just do these things and you can accomplish this. For me, I nearly cried that night being like, "Oh my gosh." Like, my industry hero came up to me and said, "Nathan, you are worth it. You can do it. It's possible." Um like, for me, that was a career highlight, knowing that like, especially for me, I feel like growing up, I was very isolated in games. I grew up in a more not rural town, but it was definitely country. And even in Melbourne, it's like our game scene is not as big as it is in the US or in Europe. And so it's very hard to kind of hop countries to get over there. You need to either move over there and basically apply for like the lowest entry jobs and work your way up. And I'm honestly not in that position to do that. Or you have to make an impact in the industry here and end up getting recruited over there. And being told that I'm on the correct path and that you can do this and that if you need any help, reach out to me was such like a burden lifted of like, okay, this can be a reality for me one day. That for me, most recently, is one thing that whenever someone says, "What's been your highlight recently?" For me, it's been that. And I'm looking forward to more career highlights. Like I've had so many, doing global game jams with people, even just going to events and meeting people has been an amazing experience. My second highlight has actually been meeting the friends at these conventions and at these events. Because I feel like a lot of my other friends, although I love them, they don't have the same drive and passion for games that I do. I always felt like I was very outcast in the sense of, they'd all go play video games and I'd be just sitting there working on my Unity project, being like, "Does anyone want to help, please? This is too hard. I can't do this." And meeting people who were the same as me, for me, has also been a career highlight in knowing that, when you actually connect with someone like that, it it's incredible. Like, yeah, it's amazing. And even during the event, I, had people who were kind of softly not job offering, but when you start to actually talk about with people potentials for future roles or do this and I'll see where you are in a year, that as well is such a career highlight for me more now, being told that, the imposter syndrome is going away. It always comes back. Like it's something that always reoccurs. But just yeah, feeling more included in the industry and more accepted. And for me, that's something that is just like, oh, such a relief, because I feel like when you're alone working on stuff, and especially when you see, like, I think the internet is just terrible for mental health most of the time because of the algorithms. Like, you'll work on your thing and then you'll go on Twitter and it's like, "I made an engine C++ in 60 days." And I'm like, "Man, I can't even get my C++ thing to compile. How did you do that in 60 days?" And so when you actually go out and speak to real people, it is just such a confidence boost, and the support in the industry is so strong now, especially I think with the layoffs and just how hard the industry is on people. When younger people come up with, bright eyes and optimism, the veterans tend to like flock around you and say, there, it'll be all right. And they take some of the like fiery arrows and like, try to make you more aloof to things. So I think that's a bit of a tangent on, career highlights. I feel like definitely when I do eventually ship my first game properly and have real game credits, that's going to be probably my one of my key milestones, and that's something right now I'm working very hard towards accomplishing.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing this experience. I'm also very glad you had the chance to meet up with your hero. I know how much it means considering all these interviews. Like the moment people are answering, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna happen. There's no way. And yeah, I totally agree. And it's amazing.
I think it's amazing too because once you meet them, I mean, at least in my experiences, people always say, don't meet your heroes. In terms of me, every time I've met my hero, I've realized how human they are
Mhm,
and how they're just really good people. That's the thing that shocked me the most talking to these Valve devs. Not shocked, but like taken back by they would every time I talked to them, they were just like, we try to make a good experience for players. We work hard, we try to have a good balance of things, and they were just really reasonable, hardworking people. And once you understand that, they're just a good person who made good things and kind of got lucky in the sense of what they made ended up having a more wider appeal success. But that kind of makes it more available to you, being like, okay, they're just human beings, all right? They're not higher than us or mightier than us. You can also accomplish what they've accomplished. And especially like I know me personally talking with other people with interviews, it can be quite daunting. But once you realize, they're just regular people who also, eat 3 meals a day and drink water and, do the same thing everything, everyone else does. It's like, okay, they're human. It's okay. We
mhm.
can stress less. They're not going to be offended by us.
Yeah.
Luckily, I haven't had any Hollywood actors talk to me, so I don't know about them so much, but everyone else in the industry seems pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. I would also love to work for one big company one day. Why not Valve? I mean, it's pretty big, but we never know if it's gonna happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
We also got a question from Blaster, and he asks, sorry, what do you say about assets flip games?
Asset flip games.
Yeah.
Um, depends on context. That's how I start every question now. Depends on the context. If you're doing a game jam game, it's fine. Like maybe you're just a programmer and you can do and the thing is too, right? Basically every game is an asset flip. Even the games that you think have been handcrafted by artists, most of the time half the things they're using they've used in previous games. There was a really good video, I have no idea where to find it though, where this guy had a professional sculptor, like a indie dev who was learning sculpting, and then him, the YouTuber who was also sculpting in Blender. And it's funny because it was kind of a challenge of sculpting from scratch. But the senior guy was like, "Oh man, I can't use my brushes for this," or "Oh, I have a base model for this." And like asset flips, I think, as a fine definition, are basically just the same assets used in games to turn a profit. I think that's the best way to define asset flips. I just, you bought something off an asset store, you put it in your game just to make a buck. Um, at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt many people because if it's not a good game, no one's going to play it. If it is a good game, or if it's just a cash grab, like it's not going to add much value to the market. But I also think that sometimes using Cinti assets is good for a game project because maybe you aren't an artist. There are people out there who don't want to play programmer art games. Maybe the people don't want to make those games either, but they can't find a good enough artist. And so using assets for games are quite important. Like for me, I will occasionally take a texture from online and put it in my game because it's a nice stylized PBR texture and it's good. It's how I want it to look. And what's the point of me recreating that if it's already been made? It's the same with using code. Most of the time, we're just going on forums, getting that line of code that works, and putting it in. You're not going to attack a programmer for reinventing the wheel each time, instead of just copying and pasting something. And so, why should we do it for artists? I think it's um, like I know there's always controversy when the new God of War game came out, Ragnarok. People are upset that they used the same animations to get in the boat as it was in the previous game, and I'm like, yeah, you're getting into a boat. Like, what you want them to entirely recreate an animation for that, or do you want more content you can save money on? And so asset flips again, like if you're talking about just cash grab games, they're going to exist no matter what, and they're not going to add much value to the market anyway. So there's no point in them really. They're not going to hurt anyone or affect anyone. Obviously, there's certain stores and stuff like we've seen with Epic's Fab. A lot of stuff has come out now because they've incorporated Sketch and all this other stuff. Um, so that's been a bit of an issue. And obviously, the eShop has a lot of asset flip games. But luckily we have filters like the new and trending, and even on Steam, it's like if you have a good enough algorithm, good games are going to rise to the top. and developers should be able to use assets, and maybe it's just using it as groundwork, maybe it's just using it as, temporary files before they replace the art with something else. Um, yeah, that's kind of my opinion on asset flips. I mean, and sometimes if it's just for a funny YouTube video, using Fiverr artists or whatever, like, what is the end goal here? Are you trying to make a fun game, or are you trying to make money, or whatever? I think at the end of the day, the public will decide what is the best fate for that game, whether it is positive or negative.
Yeah, that's true. So the gaming industry is constantly changing with new technology. We know that. How do you envision the future of game dev?
Hmm. How do I envision it? I mean, how I envision it is probably gonna be different to how I want to envision it. I would personally love to see more focus on solo devs. I think, like, one thing I really want to push with Unreal is making the tools better for smaller teams to iterate with. Because one of the things I'm finding right now, and it's one thing that kind of going in with making my own game engine, is there is so much time wasted on certain elements where it's like, I just want to press a button and move on to the next step. And so I don't think I want AI game engines, because in the end you just want to make a game engine like a regular traditional game engine anyways, because it solves all the problems that we're seeing with like the Minecraft AI game. In the end, it's going to be easier just to make your own game. But I think personally I want to see ways of speeding up production that is still allowing for creative input. Like, for example, I am not a fan of UV unwrapping, and I would love for there to be a tool that just UV unwraps it in an instant, and it's good, it's perfect. The texel density is fine, but for some reason, no matter what add-on I get, there's still an issue somewhere along the way. And so I think my optimistic view of it would be having tools that are allow less inputs, but still fine control. So being able to just click a button to UV unwrap, but if you're seeing issues with your thing and you want to fix it, so for example, if you're in like a senior position at a big game studio, being able to still go into the nitty gritty and adjusting things with how you need. And sometimes you need it for just particular game projects. If you're making a PS1 style game compared to, a realistic mega scans game, those are two very different pipelines. And so finding ways to streamline pipelines, I think, is what I want to see the most. Um, I'm expecting personally a very big renaissance in solo devs, and that's why I'm saying that I want these things um, kind of worked on more. I think AAA, a lot of the control has been taken away from the developers, and it's very much like Hollywood in the sense of the producers or the ones with the money are making all the decisions. Back in the day, and this is what I've heard at least from veterans, like in the 90s and the 2000s, um, the money people would come in maybe once or twice a year, and games were kind of just a throwaway thing. And so you had these awesome games made by these developers because they could do whatever they want, and the money people were happy because they got their return back. Now we've seen issues with certain big industry giants trying to squeeze out every dollar, and we've also seen lackluster performance optimization in certain things with certain companies, and even the fact that like things like Animal Well, which is like how many megabytes of a game, has just sold so many copies and has been such a cult classic for people and has been so commercially successful compared to Call of Duty, which is now like 200 gigs on install. Things like that, I feel like it's annoying too, because for me, the reason why I don't download Call of Duty is for a few reasons, but the most grinding reason for me is that I don't want to give up 200 gigs on my hard drive. And the people who are making the decisions for that game are not going to know that because I'm not even installing the game. And so I think a lot of the issues that AAA are facing are things that they're not going to see until it's too late, unfortunately. And what we're going to have is an uprise in solo devs, because what's happened is that like AA has disappeared completely. You either are a very small team and make really good money because your idea is unique and different, or you are proven IP, proven mechanics until you're not. And then basically we see you disappear off the face of the earth. And so I think we're going to have a renaissance of solo and indie devs kind of rising up more and either having the new IPs, and that ends up becoming the the seasonal thing that make the new game each year or whatever cycle you want to do. Um, or you'll see a renaissance as well with like one thing I saw a lot with the game publishers at the Games Week thing was that they were looking for people to pitch, but their budgets were a lot smaller. And so before they were doing like between like $1 to $20 million budget, but now they're looking at like a couple 100,000 or like even smaller, you know, pie-sized portion to give up money. And with that, you can make games where you can't make massive games. And so I hope to see more AA games come out because I think those are a great balance of making a return for the business, but also being allowed to iterate and take risks because the risk isn't as big, and therefore, hopefully the money people are more inclined to allow the developers to make the risk. Um, but at the same time, things can change, and the world's a very weird like place right now with the internet and with trends and with like the amount of people who are in kind of higher up places now who are saying they don't want big games, they want vertical games. It's like, what does that even mean? Well, what it means is they don't want massive open world games. They want smaller games, but might have a range of mechanics you can play through. Like before, earlier I said with Cult of Lamb, having a um, like dungeon crawler, farming sim, horror, like adding more things so that the game is large, not so much in scope, but in being vertical and you can do different sorts of things. And all those things in scope are small. And so we're seeing a lot of changes in that. Obviously, so many people now are really focused on like the influencer games, which are just games that are very quickly turned around, are really fun to watch, are engaging to play. Um, and so, yeah, I also think we're kind of reaching a very big saturation point in terms of like Steam is massive and has how many games published a day on it. Xbox is just massive now. They have such a massive library. And so people are, I think, going to get burnt out, not so much in playing games, but people are going to realize that, um, yeah, there's too much on offer and people are going to stick with what they like. And there's going to be changes because of that. I personally don't know. I can't predict that. And as someone who's making a game, I don't want to make any predictions because I could be very wrong. Because I'm just the guy making the thing in his basement, basically. I don't have any insider information. Um, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think games will stick around. I think we've obviously seen issues with like layoffs and with the way the technology is changing. But at the end of the day, it's going to be like back in the 80s with the crash in the US. It's like the market will still survive. Like back in the 80s when Atari fell, um, Japan was thriving and you had some amazing games like Final Fantasy and all the Pokemon and Nintendo stuff. Like they all lived on. And back in the day, they didn't have internet like how we do. So now when things crash and go down, someone else can still give you entertainment. And so and even then, like I think about entertainment, and I'm like, man, there's video games. Then like half the time I'm on TikTok, and then there's like all the streaming services, and there's so much. I haven't read a book. Actually, that's a lie. I've read a book this year, but it took me so long to read because of all the other distractions. And so I think the industry is going through this very weird phase of understanding what's actually necessary, and it's sad because obviously people who are going to have jobs and people who are going to invest, there's going to be losses had, and that's what always happens within an economy. But I hope that we have enough people, and I've seen them as well at these events, like people who are leaders in the industry who have vision for making good games and who are also smart at the business side of it, will be able to make games that players enjoy. And just talking to people like at Valve who their primary focus is just to make their players happy. It's like, okay, we're in safe hands. If things go bad for one side, there's always going to be other people who will rise up to the call and make good content for us. I just hope that that doesn't mean that there's too much suffering because of people's poor decision making, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
my very long ramble. Sorry. That
No,
you
it's
you
fine.
got some really good questions because like you get me going and then I'm off to the races.
No, I love doing interviews. It's totally fine. Don't worry about that. It's just after every video, I will cut it and make a video out of it, but still, I don't want to remove stuff. So it's probably gonna be a long video, but hey, it's good content, right? So I don't
Yeah.
mind. We also got two questions. Blaster asked you, are you gonna release a demo of your game?
Yes. So I'll tell you the main plan. So the plan is to get a vertical slice. So right now I'm playtesting the game. And once I'm happy with like a very short demo style, it's going to go on Steam. You can wishlist it. Not right now. That's not available yet. And then depending on the feedback from the demo, I will either do updates. Maybe people will like, I don't like this whole static furniture stuff. I want to design my own restaurant, cafe, or whatever. Then I'll go back to the board if there's enough wishlist interest to actually add stuff like that. But if it's mediocre, and only a couple of hundred people are like, "Oh, I like this game," then I'll work on it. But yeah, there'll be a demo available, and then when it comes out on Steam, it'll come out on Steam, and then we'll go from there. Basically, it's very much playing it by ear. This is my first big commercial release, so who knows what could happen.
I'm very excited. I will definitely play it. I really want to see the upgraded version of Penguins. I know.
Thank you.
Another question from Puzzle Maker. So, like, oh, this is back to what I asked you. So, like, using tools to accelerate game dev to getting the game to the market, AI included.
Um, it depends. AI is such a broad word that I like. It's used in commercial ways that I hate. Like everything now has AI. Like my Windows Copilot, I don't need that. Okay, I just use ChatGPT for when I have issues for things. I think certain AI assistant things are perfectly fine. I think we will see in the future what people accept and what people don't accept. Obviously, there's been very big back and forth between like what AI art is and whether or not you can use that for certain things. Many artists are very against it, and then those who are very for it are very vocal about it. And so it's very much a sensitive subject, I think. But like AI broadly, basically, we've had AI for years, but it's just been different things. For example, when you automatically UV unwrap, you're just using an algorithm to unwrap your model. And so technically that's kind of AI in a way. I think AI assisted is just such a broad term where it's like, okay, I don't like whatever that Minecraft AI game engine is. I don't want it because it doesn't have elements that are going to help me make the game. And even with the Doom one as well, it's like you basically have to make the game first and then give it video sequences to then train it on. It's like that. May as well just make a game. Like you're putting in so much effort to make stuff. Um, Other elements definitely, can use like it's the tool. What is the tool used for? And from there, it's like, yeah, go to your heart's content. And like I said before, it's like if like I know EA did one thing where they were basically showing how they want to make games just completely using AI. We'll see how much that is adopted in the games industry when it comes out. We don't know yet because we don't know the scope of that. And when people say, "Oh, in the future it's going to be, this and that," especially with like, and I've had discussions with people who are doing like the AI videos and stuff. It's like, man, even then, that takes server farms, that takes connections, that takes credits. And right now, there's big investment in AI. Everyone's putting money into AI, but very much like crypto and NFTs, there's a lot less money in those now because people have stopped investing in them. I think on the discussion of AI and things like that, it's like the models that will survive are the ones that you can run on your own machines and give good output with very little input needed. Because for me, example, I've tried doing AI art stuff, and the amount of effort you need to train models and to then iterate on certain things for me to be happy with what I want my art to be, I may as well just go learn art traditionally because I can just draw it myself. What you need is tools that can produce the work that you want in less time, but also gives you the refined features that you need to manipulate it very quickly or adaptable. So, I think tools like Blender and Unity and Unreal, those are all very good tools because they help you do things quickly, but they also give you refinement for them, if that makes sense. So AI, I wouldn't say I'm for or against it. I think it's just It's a word that I'm jaded in hearing because it usually means a big discussion about something that no one knows much about and making predictions to things where it's like, okay, right now everyone's adding AI assistants to all their services. Eventually that's going to run out because they're going to realize that we're spending all this money to license out ChatGPT, but no one's using it because no one needs it in whatever service we're adding it into.
Yeah, interesting point of view. So, guys, if you have any more questions, make sure to drop them in the chat because we are very close to the end. And my final question for you is, for those just getting started, what's one piece of advice you wish you had received earlier in your career?
I feel like I prepared for this one, but I'm still not ready for it. Advice that I wish I'd known. Okay. Figure out what you want to do first. And once you've found something you enjoy, like for example, if you want to get a job in games, pick a career, whether it is rigging, programming, and being specific in the programming. Is it like AI programming? Is it porting old games to new platforms? Figure out a career path that you actually want, and then hyper focus on the skill set you need to get there. I feel like I right now could have a job in games if I just focused on something and didn't get distracted every year on working and doing a new thing. Um, but another thing too, it's tricky because when you work with others, it can either accelerate you or it can limit you greatly and make the experience terrible. Growing up, I did quite a few um, projects that were like massive MMORPG zombie shooters that never went anywhere because no one did anything. We all just worked in the design document, and I was inexperienced, had no idea how to even program, let alone do something as big as that. And so I think, and it's hard for people too because some of us aren't in the position to collaborate with people, and sometimes you just can't find the network you need. But my two words of advice is if you want to find a job in games, specialize in something and focus on it and become as good as you can in that field, and you will get a job in games. And try not to get too distracted with other things. And if you want to get a job in games, then do jobs that are specialized and aren't as how do you say, people aren't always going to go for. So don't just be a programmer. Be a programmer in something, whether it is like CPU infrastructure, whether it is like gameplay programming. Specialize in something in that area. When you're doing art, get really good at just doing one type of art. It's good to generalize, but I think if you want a job in games, you need to specialize as well. I know, especially for certain roles, things like technical artists, whether that's rigging, VFX, shaders, finding those very particular things and specializing in them will give you such an advantage when you're applying for jobs. I wish, honestly, starting out, that I don't know. It's such a hard question to answer because I feel like people are going to listen to this and take on whatever I say on board. Be like, oh, yes, Nathan said this, therefore I will listen to it. But I think the one thing I wish I knew starting out was that when you do hear advice from people like me or whoever on the internet, um, take the wisdom but then put your perspective in it. For example, for me, I basically saw Notch and said, all right, therefore, to be like Notch, I need to go make Minecraft with Java and do all these things. I can't do that though, because one, I'm not Notch, I'm not in Sweden, and Java has already been made with Minecraft and stuff. Like, it's all been done before. What you need to do is take the more conceptual learnings from those things and have your own story and experience. Take people's wisdom and then apply it to your own, and be yourself in the sense of like, okay, this is what you're making. This is the thing you need to work on. You're not making Minecraft, you're not making this game that you're trying to replicate. You're making your game. Because when I've seen people, those who have made like Animal World, I'm trying to think of like, just look at any indie game basically. They were inspired by something, but they created something completely new and different, and they had their own story and experiences. And your story and experience will be very different to theirs in many ways. You'll have different trials, you'll have, different limitations to them, different skill sets. And as long as you're taking in wisdom and then basically going out on your own, that's the best thing I can give to you. Because, I could go say, go get a job in rigging because that's going to make you the most money and this and that. But at the end of the day, that might not be the case for you because you have a different skill set and mindset to me. And so I wish going out and learning to begin with is that like your journey is going to be very different in games. And I guess the last thing that I would wish I knew is that most people stumble into game jobs accidentally. It's not on purpose. And so a lot of the time you'll just be working on a thing. And the time that you're not expecting to get a job offer or get into games or have that opportunity blow up, it's when you least expect it to happen. I've been given soft job offers when I wasn't looking for work compared to when I was going to everyone saying I want a job and there was nothing there for me. And so sometimes you just have to stick through it to the end, keep doing what you're doing, and when you least expect it, that's when the opportunity comes. And when you do have those opportunities, take them. Take them, please. That's it.
Okay,
That's my TED talk.
that's great. Great TED talk indeed. You also made me very curious about the Minecraft documentary because I don't think I've ever watched it. I didn't know about its existence and I'm sad.
Yeah, if you just go to on YouTube, One Player Productions,
Mhm.
Minecraft, and that's where you will find it. They had a full length documentary, which I think you can buy online somewhere. But for me, it's like that preview is the thing that like sparked me, and it was just basically them going to Notch and like seeing his little studio and him working and him like hiring Jeb and everyone kind of talking about like, oh, what is this Minecraft game? But yeah, it's awesome. It's the thing that I still go back to remind myself of like, this is where I came from, and this is the thing that's gonna, when people ask me why do you make games, I point to this and say, for some reason, this video, flipped a switch in my head, and now I'm like addicted to making video games. I can't stop making games.
That's a nice obsession, I would say. Also, another question from Blaster. How do you market your game?
Oh boy, that's a whole other video in of itself. I've actually learned a lot recently about that. And I mean, the best thing to do, right, for those who want to market your game is just, again, go into these events. Find someone who's maybe freelance or you just like, you'll find people who just love marketing games. This is something that I've discovered. And as soon as you ask them like one question of like, how would you do this? They will just tell you all the industry trends and secrets. Like I've got one friend who I talk to each year, and he tells me all the updates and all the things. And it was funny too. They had an after party kind of thing with this whole Games Week thing in Melbourne, and this one guy was talking about how he put his game on Reddit and got wish lists, and I was like, man, how'd you go on Reddit and not get banned? And then it was like a 4 hour discussion on how to market your game on Reddit, and I was like, wow. Because the funny answer to that question was, how do you not get banned? It's, yeah, get banned, but then go to the next subreddit. Like, Reddit isn't just r/game dev. Like, go to any subreddit that is related to the topic of your thing. Like, for me, for example, he's like, you're in Melbourne, put it in r/Melbourne. You're, a cafe thing, okay, put it in r/cafe or coffee or whatever else. Like, finding different subreddits to put your game in. And if you get banned, so what? Appeal, try it again, change things or whatever. But just like going through. Um, the best way I've at least heard more recently in marketing your game, especially if you can get it for influencers, is just reaching out to influencers and getting them to play your game. That is probably one of the best ways and the most like cheapest ways I think to get your game marketed now is getting people who are making content like this online to show your game. It's a lot cheaper to do that and maybe even pay them for a sponsor segment than it is technically to start your own YouTube channel and do devlogs and all those other things. Because let me tell you, a lot of time and energy and effort and wasted money in the sense of like the investment I put into the channel rather than other things I could have, like a part-time job. Um, Technically, right now isn't worth it. In the long term, I hope it is. And at the end of the day, it's just a thing I love doing. I love making videos. But marketing your game, yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's a very, very long-winded question, long-winded answer. But yeah, you have to figure it out. And the best way to do it is just to find someone at an event or maybe even in Discords who like marketing and just try to get them to talk and then listen. That's the other thing too is like just listen to some of these people because if you let them, they're like me. Like you ask one question and then we don't stop talking and we just give you all of the knowledge in our head. And then by the end of the fourth hour, you're like, I've learned so much, which hopefully you all have watching this. But yeah, marketing your game, it's it's a tricky one because again, it depends on context. Is it a mobile game? Is it for consoles? Is it for PC? What type of game is it? You know, there's all these different things you got to figure out. Like for me, the way I'm going to market my game is obviously through my own YouTube channel, but also reaching out to cozy YouTube streamers and stuff like that, getting that cozy market, and then also figuring out from there more interesting ways to market your game. Like for me, I'd love to go to just like cafes and say, "Hey, I'm making a game. Can I put my little poster in your shop?" Or even one thing oh, I've sometimes I get these random ideas of things that I'm like, I want to experiment just to see what happens if I do this. Because I don't know for those watching if you have this, but in my country, in like the malls and shopping centers, you have people who like stand around looking for donations or they're like selling things or like where Santa is and you get the Santa pictures. I want to rent out one of those spaces during the year and just have people like a game convention basically, but in the middle of like a shopping mall near like EB Games or GameStop or you know whatever store that's near you, and just see if you get anything from that. Because I think as well, like um, you can do things on TikTok and social media, but then it's like, man, talking to social media managers now, and some of them are like, you just got to be edgy, and I don't have that in me to be that. And other people are just like, you got to be creative. Some of the best marketing campaigns are just ones of people just being really smart and knowing how to do things. And we don't always have that skill set. And so if you're someone who isn't confident in marketing or maybe who feels very out of their depth, the best way to do it is to probably go to someone who is more knowledgeable. Maybe they're freelance, maybe they do other things, and just reach out to them. Maybe budget in a way to use their time and experience. Because yeah, marketing your game's hard, and yeah, it's for me, marketing your game is basically trying to find the audience that wants to play your game. And for some things, like with YouTube videos, YouTube does that for me. They find the audience for me. But with games, sometimes if it's a good enough game on Steam, if you do the correct things with you know titles and banners and descriptions, you could be lucky enough to just get picked up with the Steam algorithm. But other things, yeah, it's it's complicated and a very long question, and yeah, yeah, you're best to go talk to someone who is the marketing person, and that is their like title and their knowledge base, and they will just shovel all the information onto you for you, and you can just go crazy with that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a great answer, though. I also learned a lot. So I don't see any other question. I guess this is gonna be the end. Nathan, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's been inspiring to hear about your journey and the passion that drives your work. So, yeah, thank you very much for accepting this interview and being here. It really means a lot, and I also learned
Thank
valuable.
you very much for having me. It's been so fun to talk, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm usually a very quiet person, but as soon as someone says, "Hey, do you want to talk about video games?" I will just take the conversation and just so I wish I could talk to you more about things and maybe I'll have you on mine and we can do reverse interview when I have time.
Ooh,
But yeah, I really appreciate it. I hope you've all enjoyed the video and had fun because I definitely have. And yeah, good luck to everyone making your games. You know,
thank
make
you.
good games.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I also have to put more work into it because I don't know if you saw something about me or I'm a student and I have other courses as well. So I'm not really free and my spare time is dedicated to the YouTube channel itself with of course interviews, editing videos, all this stuff, trying to work on my games. I just didn't have enough time to build assets and all this stuff. But as soon as I am having a holiday, all my time is gonna be dedicated to games probably. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. It's funny. I'm actually going back to school next year for computer science and spending the next 3 years doing games adjacent. I'm adding a few game courses to keep my sanity, but like I but even like yeah, for me it's like I've worked full time, I've had other things going on. Yeah, it's hard to make games, especially when you're not doing it as your job.
Mhm.
But I think it also shows commitment, and people who do that, eventually, if you do it long enough, you will make it. And I think especially once you do graduate, people are very supportive of recent graduates and students in making games. And so, like, best of luck to you. Hopefully, you will land those opportunities. And even things like this, like I feel like if
Yeah.
YouTube can be a platform for you, that's another thing. And all the people you've met and the experiences and the connections you have now, like more than 100%, you can reach out to people now and be like into their DMs again and be like, "Hey, so I've got this thing. I've got a question for you or whatever else." And it's yeah, you're
Yeah.
definitely working very hard to make some really good things. So yeah, you reap what you sow. So if you're working hard and doing what you should be doing, then you will definitely be rewarded for it.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we will see each other again soon enough.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you very much. Take care and good luck on your game.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Bye. Okay, guys. 1 second. You will be able to see me in just few seconds. I have to, you know, play with OBS. There you go. I think now you can see me. It's been a pleasure. 100%. I learned a lot of stuff. As always, it's been great. This has been a very long interview and I won't cut it. I just post everything on my channel because I feel like everything is very valuable and I don't feel the need to cut anything. So yeah, I'm the Nonconformist. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Hopefully you'll have a great week. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. What's your secret? Oh no. That's too late. I was waiting for the questions. We canceled the interview. What's your secret? How do you get all the game devs for interviews? Oh, hold on. That's a question for me. Okay. Phew. Um, what's your secret? How do you get all the game devs for interviews? I have seen just the last 10 minutes, but it looks interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, so you have been here. I was afraid you missed it and you asked the question and it was too late. So, my secret. Should I share my secret or not? I don't know. I just use X, former Twitter, to approach them and I just literally DM them. I won't say you the way I DM them. That's my personal thing, my secret um insight, but it's not that hard. Just reach out to them. They are very, very easy to talk to, open to answer. Like, I also didn't expect them to answer. That's the thing. So it really means a lot. Just have enough courage to approach the people and they will 60-70% respond, but be patient. Don't rush the process because you can send a message to someone now and they can reply after few months, few days, few weeks. So just be patient. Don't spam them. Don't be like, hey, you don't want to do this, you haven't answered. So don't put pressure on anyone's shoulders. Everyone is busy. I feel like not only content creators or the people that are making games. Everyone is busy nowadays, especially in this social media era. So take your time, let them do their stuff, and once they are done and free to talk, they will 100% answer your DM. So yeah, I'm the Nonconformist. Thank you guys very much for watching. It's been a pleasure. As always, take care, and I will see you. I don't know exactly when because I will have few exams, so I won't be probably that active, but I have to edit this interview ASAP. Hopefully, it's not gonna take that long. We will see because I also have other stuff to do. So yeah, I'll see you. Bye.